I let my ex-boyfriend hold my newborn son 90 seconds before my husband did, and now everyone assumes I'm some adulterous monster who planned this whole thing. They're not entirely wrong. My marriage is over. Mark walked out of Lincoln Memorial Hospital and didn't look back. His sister collected his things while I was still bleeding through maternity pads. The whole world thinks I cheated, but the truth is worse than infidelity. I need to explain why I made that choice, why Daniel had to touch Liam's skin before Mark's hands ever could. There's a medical report that changes everything, and I'll show you exactly how we got here. The contractions started at 3 in the morning, but I'd been awake since midnight, scrolling through photos of Mark's deceased brother. Thomas had died at 22 months from a rare neurodegenerative disorder that I'd only learned about after our wedding. Mark's mother kept an online memorial with pictures of this beautiful boy who looked exactly like my husband, right down to the cleft in his chin. The caption beneath his last photograph read, "My perfect boy, stolen by the SPG7 gene." I spent my entire pregnancy terrified that my child would inherit the marker Mark refused to test for. My OBGYN called it new mother anxiety. My best friend called it pregnancy brain. I called it survival instinct. At week 34, I started having panic attacks that felt like heart attacks. The hospital ran EKGs, gave me Ativan, sent me home. Mark held my hand through it all, whispering that everything would be fine, but he wouldn't get tested. "I don't want to know," he said. "I just want to be happy." His denial felt like a wall between us. That's when I did something I'm not proud of. I opened my phone and found Daniel's number, the ex I'd dated for 4 years in college, the one who became a pediatric geneticist. I just wanted information, I told myself. Just someone who understood the science. We met for coffee at a place where nobody knew us, 3 weeks before my due date. I told myself it wasn't a secret because it was professional. He wore his white coat from the research hospital, and I showed him Mark's family history that I'd compiled like a criminal investigation. Daniel's face went pale when he saw the inheritance pattern. "If Mark's a carrier, your baby has a 50% chance of being one too." He reached across the table, not for my hand, but for the paperwork. "Most carriers are asymptomatic, but if Liam has it, you'll know by his first birthday." The way he said my son's name, so familiar, so practiced, should have been my first warning. Mark was parking the car when my water broke in the hospital lobby. I told Daniel we were being induced that morning. When he texted to ask if he could stop by and say hi, I said yes. The nurses assumed he was my brother. They didn't question the man in the Patagonia jacket who showed up with a stuffed giraffe and medical-grade hand sanitizer. Mark walked in carrying my hospital bag, and there was Daniel, his hands already under the warmers, his thumbnail tracing Liam's perfect little ear. "I was just keeping him company," Daniel said, and I watched my husband's face collapse like a demolished building. Mark didn't yell. He set the bag down, turned around, and left. The baby started crying, but I couldn't move. My sister Sarah found me still in the delivery bed 3 hours later, scrolling through Mark's Instagram. He'd posted a photo of our empty nursery with the caption, "Sometimes you build a room for a family that was never yours." The comments were already filling with questions. I hadn't told anyone about the SPG7 gene, not even Sarah. She sat on the edge of my bed and said, "Tell me you didn't sleep with him." When I shook my head, she sighed with relief. "Then why, Jenna? Why would you let Daniel be the first?" The answer stuck in my throat. "Because I needed a genetic counselor to see my baby before his father did. Because I'd rather have a doctor's eyes on him first. Because I was a coward." The discharge nurse gave me paperwork for a birth certificate with a blank space for father's information. "You can leave it empty and fill it later," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured kindness. My phone exploded with messages. Mark's mother posted a photo of him moving into her basement with the caption, "My poor boy deserves so much better." My own mother called, crying, asking what I'd done. I tried to explain about the gene, about the fear, but she interrupted, "You don't ruin a marriage with what-ifs, Jennifer." The what-ifs were all I had. I posted a photo of Liam's tiny hand clutching my finger, captioned, "My world, my everything." The first comment was from Daniel, "He's perfect. Call me if you need anything." I deleted it immediately, but not before Mark's sister screenshot it. I went home to an empty house. Mark had taken the crib, the changing table, the glider. He left the diaper genie and a note, "I don't know whose baby this is, but I can't be his father." The paternity test he demanded would prove what I already knew, Liam was his. But the test I had Daniel run was different. While Mark was in the cafeteria getting coffee during my labor, Daniel had swabbed Liam's cheek. Just a quick check, he'd whispered, for your peace of mind. The results came in while I was still hospital-bound, carrier but asymptomatic. Liam would live. The relief made me dizzy. I texted Daniel, thank you. He replied, always. That one word undid me. My best friend Lara showed up with lasagna and judgment. Everyone's talking, she said. They think you're having an affair. I was, just not the kind anyone imagined. I was having an affair with certainty, with information, with control. I'd chosen knowledge over trust, data over marriage vows. When Lara asked if Daniel was Liam's father, I laughed so hard I started crying. No, I sobbed. He's just the man who told me my son wouldn't die. She didn't understand. How could she? I hadn't told her about Thomas, about the gene, about the way Mark's silence felt like a death sentence for our unborn child. Mark's lawyer sent papers citing marital abandonment and emotional adultery. Emotional adultery. As if my crime was feeling something rather than doing something, I hired my own attorney who told me I had a strong case for reconciliation. Just apologize, she said. Tell him you made a mistake. But I couldn't apologize for the one thing I didn't regret. Daniel had given me what Mark wouldn't: clarity, the right to know, the ability to prepare. When I refused to apologize for Daniel's involvement, my lawyer sighed and billed me for another hour. The social media campaign against me was brutal. Mark's cousin posted a TikTok, when your sister-in-law lets her ex hold the baby first. It got 200,000 views. I read every comment. She definitely cheated. DNA test the baby. That's so toxic. They were all wrong and all right at once. I hadn't cheated, but I'd committed the ultimate betrayal. I treated my husband like a genetic risk factor instead of a person. When my employers saw the video, they recognized my living room. I got placed on administrative leave pending review of personal conduct. I was a paralegal. My conduct was supposed to be impeccable. Daniel called on Liam's 1-week birthday. I feel responsible, he said. Let me talk to Mark. I hung up. The next day, flowers arrived with a card for Liam. Welcome to the world. Love, Uncle Daniel. Mark's mother saw the delivery guy. She posted the audacity of homewreckers. I was losing the war of public opinion, but I'd won the only battle that mattered. Liam was healthy. Wasn't he? The genetic report said carrier. But carriers don't develop symptoms. They just pass it on. I'd saved my son from a life of uncertainty, but I'd condemned him to a life without his father. My breaking point came when Mark texted, does he look like me or him? The him crushed me. I video called Daniel for the first time since the hospital. His face looked worn, guilty. You need to tell him, Daniel said. About the gene, about why I was there. I screamed that Mark wouldn't listen, that he'd chosen ignorance. Daniel's voice dropped. Jenna, you chose fear, there's a difference. He was right. I'd spent 9 months preparing for my child's death instead of celebrating his life. I'd made Mark into a villain for wanting happiness. I'd made Daniel into a hero for giving me data. I wrote Mark a letter, 12 pages explaining everything. The gene, Thomas, my terror, Daniel's test. I mailed it to his mother's house. 3 days later, I got a 2-sentence reply. You should have told me. You should have trusted me. The word trusted was underlined 3 times. I wanted to scream that trust works both ways. He should have told me about the gene before we started trying. But I'd known about Thomas before the wedding. I'd seen the symptoms in the photos. I'd chosen to believe love conquered genetics. Then I'd chosen to make sure it did. The paternity test came back with the results I already knew. 99 match for Mark. He sent me a photo of the results with no caption. I replied, I never doubted it. He replied, you doubted everything else. He was right. I doubted his right to know, his ability to handle the truth, his love for our son. I'd appointed myself the sole guardian of information, the only adult capable of handling reality. When Daniel swabbed Liam's cheek, he'd done it with my full consent. When Mark watched from the hallway, seeing another man touch his child first, I'd robbed him of fatherhood's first sacred moment. Mark's mother called me at 2 a.m. You're a monster, she slurred. I could hear whine in her voice. You used that poor boy's medical training to spy on your own child. She wasn't wrong. Daniel had violated every ethical boundary because I asked him to, because I needed him to. Because the idea of Mark holding Liam, loving him, bonding with him, only to possibly lose him to a gene Mark might carry, it was unbearable. So I stole the uncertainty from myself and gave the pain to Mark instead. I tried to see Liam through Mark's perspective. He'd watched his brother deteriorate, watched his parents grieve. He'd chosen to live in the space between scientific knowledge and hope. I'd chosen to excavate every possible truth, even if it meant digging up our marriage's foundation. When I looked at my son, I saw health. When Mark looked at him now, he saw my betrayal. Which was worse? The court date arrived, custody hearing. Mark wanted supervised visitation until he could trust my judgment. My lawyer argued that I'd never endangered Liam. The judge asked, then why involve the ex-boyfriend? I opened my mouth to explain about the gene, but Mark's lawyer objected. Irrelevant, he said. The issue is maternal fitness, not genetics. They were turning my fear into a character flaw, my precaution into pathology. I wanted to yell that I'd saved us all from a future of watching our son die, but I'd already done that. In waiting rooms, in secret, in betrayal. Mark testified that he didn't know Daniel was coming, that I'd never mentioned contacting him, that I'd made him feel like an optional parent. The words optional parent made me sob so hard the bailiff handed me tissues. He was right. I treated Mark's role as father as something that could be filled by any qualified male. Daniel had medical training. Daniel could read the signs. Daniel gave me certainty. Mark gave me love, and I'd thrown it away for data. My mother testified that I'd always been overly anxious, that I'd read too many medical journals, that I'd borrowed trouble where none existed. She didn't mention that my anxiety had saved her life when I insisted she get a mammogram at 42. She found a tumor. Early stage, she was alive because I couldn't stop searching for what might be wrong. But this time, I'd found something that wasn't there, a crisis of my own making. Daniel sent Mark a letter CCing me. He explained his role, the test, the results. He took full responsibility. He offered to pay for family therapy. He used words like overstepped and misguided attempt to help. Mark's reply came through his lawyer. Dr. Reeves's professional opinions are not welcome in our family matters. The formal language cut deeper than any curse word. Daniel was now Dr. Reeves. I was now the mother. Mark was the father. Liam was the child. We'd become legal entities instead of people. The final decree gave me primary custody but required co-parenting classes. Mark got every other weekend. Daniel got nothing. I got a life of explaining to Liam why daddy lives somewhere else. Why mommy made a choice that broke our family. Why love sometimes means letting fear win. The judge's parting words, Ms. Carter, you can't inoculate your child against every possible pain. Sometimes you have to live in the uncertainty. She was right. I'd vaccinated Liam against a genetic possibility and infected our family with a certain destruction. Mark moved back into our house. I moved into my mother's spare room. Liam's nursery stayed intact, a museum of what we'd almost been. Mark sent photos through a co-parenting app, Liam eating sweet potatoes, Liam rolling over, Liam's first tooth. I responded with scheduled updates. Liam had his 6-month checkup, all milestones normal. The formality felt like a shroud. We'd buried our marriage and were now exchanging condolences. I told myself I'd do it again, that protecting Liam from the possibility of SBG7 was worth Mark's anger. Then Liam turned 1, healthy, perfect. The age Thomas had started showing symptoms. Mark posted a video of Liam walking. I watched it 400 times. He was fine. He was always going to be fine. Or was he? The uncertainty was still there, just dormant. I traded one fear for another. My mother found the medical report in my suitcase. She read it while I was at work. When I came home, she was crying. You had him tested, she whispered. Without Mark's consent, I nodded. She looked at me like I was a stranger. You violated your own child's bodily autonomy to protect him from a maybe. The word violated hung in the air. She was right. I'd swabbed my son's cheek like he was evidence. I treated him like a patient before he was a person. I saw Mark at Liam's 2nd birthday party. We rented a neutral space, invited separate friends. Mark brought his new girlfriend. I brought my mother. Liam ran to both of us equally, this tiny diplomat in a war he didn't understand. When Mark's girlfriend picked him up, I felt a surge of fury. She hadn't earned the right. Then I looked at Mark's face, softer than I'd seen it in years, and realized I'd never given him the chance to earn his rights as a father. I'd assigned them, withheld them, distributed them based on my own terror. The story I'm telling you now, the one you're reading, is my attempt to understand what I did. I started a blog called The Carrier about mothers who make impossible choices. It has 3 followers: my sister, Daniel, who I asked to stop reading, and a woman in Ohio whose husband also carries a genetic marker. She asked, did your choice save your child? I don't know. Liam is healthy. Mark is happy. I am alone. Saved from what? Yesterday, Daniel emailed, I met someone. I'm telling her everything. I wanted you to know I'm not hiding anymore. The subtext was clear. I was his secret, his shame, the woman who used him to spy on her own family. Replied, I'm glad. I meant it. He deserves to live without my shadow, without the weight of what we did in that delivery room. Mark texted last night. Liam asked why you and I don't live together. My fingers hovered over the keys. I could tell the truth. Mommy was scared. Mommy made a mistake. Mommy thought information was more important than love. Instead I typed because sometimes grown-ups need different houses to be the best parents. He replied he deserves better than that answer. He's right. So here I am, 2 years later, typing this in my mother's kitchen while Liam naps. I'm telling this story now because Daniel's email made me realize I've been waiting for absolution from the wrong people. I thought if Mark understood, he'd forgive me. If my mother understood, she'd stop looking at me like I'm broken. If strangers on the internet understood, they'd stop calling me AI. Still can't believe everyone thinks I meant for this to happen. The nurses whispered behind my back, my own mother stopped returning my calls, and my husband, well, he didn't even wait for the discharge papers. They all see this black and white story about a woman who chose her ex over her family, but that's not what went down in that delivery room. Not really. And the thing is, I know how bad it looks. I let Marcus hold Emma before her own father did. I texted him from the hospital bathroom while my husband was parking the car. I orchestrated the whole thing, and now I'm sitting in this empty apartment with a baby who won't stop crying, and a divorce summons on my kitchen table. But here's what nobody understands: by the time I made that choice, I'd already lost everything that mattered. The real story starts 9 months earlier, when I first found out I was pregnant and felt nothing but panic. My husband David had been trying for a baby for 2 years. The fertility treatments, the ovulation tracking, the scheduled sex, it had turned our marriage into a science experiment. When that test finally turned positive, I watched his face crumple with joy while I stood there calculating how much weight I'd gain, how my career as a nurse would stall, how I'd never be the fun, spontaneous woman he'd married. I smiled and cried with him, but inside I was already mourning the person I used to be. That disconnect grew each month. David would talk to my belly every night, his voice full of wonder, while I'd lie there feeling like a host organism. I started texting Marcus again in my second trimester, just innocent stuff at first, memories from our college days, jokes about how weird pregnancy was. He'd broken my heart 5 years ago by choosing a job in Seattle over our relationship, but he'd always been the one person who made me feel interesting. David made me feel safe. There's a difference. The day I went into labor, David was so prepared. He had the hospital bag packed, the car seat installed, the route mapped to avoid traffic. He held my hand through 14 hours of contractions, never left my side, told me I was doing amazing. I love him for that. But when they finally wheeled me into delivery, all I could think was that this baby was coming out and I'd never be free again. Marcus had texted me that morning, thinking of you today, and I hadn't replied. But when the doctor said it was time to push, I asked David to grab me some ice chips from the cafeteria. He kissed my forehead and said he'd be back in 5 minutes. As soon as he left, I texted Marcus the room number. I told myself I just wanted someone to witness this moment who wouldn't judge me for being scared. Marcus walked in while I was mid-push, which was insane, but the nurses assumed he was family. He stood in the corner, eyes wide, watching this bloody, primal thing happening to me. When Emma finally came out screaming, they placed her on my chest and I looked at Marcus, not David. I looked at him and saw the life I could have had, the one without mortgage payments and fertility charts and this suffocating responsibility. That's the part that makes me sick. It wasn't about Emma. It was about me. David came back with the ice chips exactly 3 minutes later. He didn't even know Marcus had been there. The nurses were cleaning me up, Emma was nursing, and I just let him believe he'd been present for everything. When he asked if he could hold his daughter, I said of course and handed her over, but the moment had already been stolen. Marcus had touched her first. His hands had supported her head before her father's had. And in some twisted way, that felt like justice for the version of myself I'd lost. The photo happened by accident. Marcus had snapped one on his phone, me holding Emma, both of us exhausted and red-faced, and texted it to me with the caption, "She's perfect." I didn't delete it. I kept it in my hidden folder like a secret trophy. David found it 3 days later when I was in the shower. He wasn't snooping. My phone buzzed with a pediatrician reminder, and he glanced at the screen. The photo was still open. I came out of the bathroom to find him sitting on the edge of the bed, holding my phone, his face completely blank. "When was this taken?" he asked, and I could hear the edge in his voice. I should have told him everything right then. I should have said Marcus came by the hospital and I was overwhelmed and I made a terrible mistake. But instead I said, "That's from delivery. The nurse took it." The lie came out so easily, like I'd been rehearsing it. David stared at me for a long moment, then handed back my phone and said, "You look tired, you should rest." He didn't mention it again for 2 whole days. That silence was worse than yelling. By the end of the week, I'd convinced myself that the lie was kinder than the truth. What good would it do to tell him? It would just make him feel insecure, and I was already dealing with postpartum hormones and bleeding and this baby who wouldn't latch. I told myself I was protecting him. That's what we do when we're really protecting ourselves, we call it love. The first real crack came when my sister visited. She picked up my phone to show me pictures of her new puppy and saw Marcus's name in my recent texts. "Why are you talking to him?" she asked, and I could hear the judgment in her voice. I snatched the phone back and said it was nothing, just a congratulations text, but she gave me that look, the one that said she knew I was lying. She didn't push it, but the energy shifted. She stopped offering to help with Emma and started making excuses to leave early. David changed too. He became hypervigilant in a way that made my skin crawl. He'd ask who I was texting while I was scrolling through Instagram. He'd hover when my phone buzzed. One night I woke up at 3 a.m. to find him sitting in the dark watching Emma sleep. "I just want to make sure she's breathing," he said, but I knew it was more than that. He was looking for proof that she was his, that this family was real. I should have comforted him. I should have put my arms around him and told him he was the only father she would ever need. But I rolled over and pretended to go back to sleep because I couldn't stand the weight of his need. The day everything exploded started normally enough. David had gone back to work, and I was home alone with Emma, trying to figure out how to breastfeed without crying. My phone buzzed Marcus again. "Can I come see her, just for a minute?" I should have said no. I should have blocked his number and focused on my marriage, but I was so lonely. I typed back okay and gave him our address. He was there in 20 minutes, holding a stuffed giraffe and looking like he'd rehearsed this moment. I let him hold Emma while I made coffee. He rocked her and whispered things I couldn't hear. When I came back, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes and said, "She has your smile." That's when David's car pulled into the driveway. He'd forgotten his laptop. I saw his headlights through the window and felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. Marcus handed me the baby and slipped out the back door like a thief. David walked in, saw the giraffe on the counter and asked, "Who was here?" I said no one, it was a delivery, but my voice shook. He looked at me, then at Emma, then back at me. "You're lying," he said, and for the first time in our marriage there was no love in his voice, just exhaustion. The fight that followed was the kind that breaks things permanently. I admitted Marcus had come by, but I swore it was innocent. David asked to see my phone. I refused. He asked if I was sleeping with him. I said no, but I couldn't look him in the eye. He asked if Emma was his. That question hung in the air like poison. I should have said, of course, immediately. I should have been outraged. But I hesitated for half a second, just long enough for him to see the doubt in my eyes. That hesitation destroyed us. He packed a bag and left while I sat on the floor with Emma screaming in my arms. The next day, I did something unforgivable. I called my mother and told her David had been emotionally abusive, that he'd accused me of cheating because he was paranoid and controlling. I left out the part about Marcus. I left out the hospital. I made myself the victim and David the villain. My mother believed me. She told my sister, who told their whole side of the family. Within a week, David was getting angry calls from my uncles, threatening him for mistreating me. He never defended himself. He just took it, probably because he thought I was finally telling the truth about how unhappy I'd been. The irony is I was lying to everyone but him. He knew exactly what I'd done. 2 weeks after he left, I got the paternity test results. I'd ordered them online, swabbed Emma's cheek while she slept, mailed it off with a check I couldn't really afford. When the email came saying David was her biological father with 99.9 certainty, I didn't feel relief. I felt trapped. I'd been hoping, God help me, I'd been hoping, that Marcus was the father because that would justify everything. It would make my betrayal make sense. But Emma was David's, which meant I'd destroyed my marriage for nothing. I sat there staring at that PDF and realized I'd become the kind of person I used to judge. David found out about the test because I was an idiot and used our joint credit card. He called me, not angry, just tired. "Why did you need a test, Sarah?" he asked, and I could hear the hurt underneath the calm. I told him the truth for the first time. I told him about the texts, the hospital, the photo, the loneliness. I told him I'd been having an emotional affair with Marcus for months, that I'd let him hold Emma first because some twisted part of me wanted him to be her father. I told him everything. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then he said, "I'm filing for full custody, don't fight me on this." He hung up, and that was the last time we spoke. The divorce was finalized in 6 months. I got supervised visitation, every other Sunday for 4 hours at a center with sticky floors and broken toys. David remarried a year later to a woman who posts pictures of Emma on Instagram with captions like "My beautiful girl." I'm not allowed to comment. I'm not allowed to be tagged. I'm a ghost in my daughter's life, and I did it to myself. The thing that keeps me up at night isn't that David left. It's that he was right to leave. I see that now. I was so focused on what I was losing, my freedom, my identity, my desirability, that I couldn't see what I was gaining. Emma is 4 now. She calls David's wife Mommy. She doesn't know who I am. The last time I saw her, she asked the supervisor if I was the nice lady who brings the goldfish crackers. That broke something in me that will never heal. I started writing this because today is Emma's birthday, and I saw a photo of David's new family at her party. They're all wearing matching shirts and smiling like they've never known pain. The comments are full of people saying what a wonderful father David is, what a beautiful family they make. And they're right. He is a wonderful father. He always was. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy looking at what I'd given up instead of what I'd been given. So here's the truth I promised you at the beginning. I let Marcus hold Emma first because I wanted to punish David for changing me. I wanted to prove that I still had power, that I could still turn heads, that I wasn't just a milk machine in sweatpants. I told myself it was harmless, that it didn't mean anything, that David would never know. But every choice we make means something, even the ones we pretend don't count. Especially those. The moment Marcus's arms closed around my newborn daughter, I felt this sick rush of satisfaction. Like I'd won some game only I was playing. David walked in 30 seconds later, and I handed him his baby like I hadn't just stolen something sacred. He looked at her, then at me, with such pure love that I almost confessed right then. But I didn't. I let him believe he was the first. I let him build his fatherhood on a lie. And when he finally found out, he didn't just leave me at the hospital. He left the person I'd become, the woman who could look at her perfect family and see only what was missing. I tell myself I was postpartum and scared and alone, but those are just excuses. The truth is I was selfish. I wanted to have my baby and my old life too. I wanted to be a mother and the woman men text at midnight. I thought I could keep both worlds spinning, but all I did was drop the one thing that mattered. So judge me if you want. God knows I deserve it. But before you decide I'm a monster, ask yourself this: have you ever wanted something so badly? A feeling, a moment, a version of yourself, that you were willing to burn down everything else to get it? Have you ever stood in a hospital room holding everything you ever wanted and felt only the weight of everything you'd lost? That's where I was. That's who I was. And that's why my husband left me at the hospital, holding a baby I wasn't ready to love and a lie I wasn't strong enough to tell.